How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and definitely a different setup this week. I fully intention on doing the regular version of the show that we do. All the Christian Slater stuff was loaded, ready to go. Everything was all set, and then I don't know what it is. I've talked about this on stream and in some of the videos I've done. OBS has just become my worst enemy lately, and I truly don't know what's going on. It would not load the green screen, like the green screen stuff just wouldn't work. It wouldn't load. So I peel back the curtain here. I load those Christian Slater dialogue lines like in advance into like a soundboard that I have that runs through OBS. Does not want to take it this week. I don't know what's going on. It's getting to the point where it's seriously a 50-50 chance if OBS is going to work when I open it. I've had it not recognize my capture card. I've had it not recognize the camera. I've had it not recognize both. It has been a serious pain as of late. So I apologize. It's going to be a stripped down version of the show this week, but it is still a loaded show this week because Starfield is finally out. I would say arguably the most anticipated video game release I would say since Cyberpunk came out in 2020. I've had a difficult time trying to figure out whose hype was maybe more. And I think I'm probably going to give Starfield the edge simply because despite CD Projekt Red having a good track record ahead of time or ahead of time with The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3, Witcher 1 wasn't really like the phenomenon that especially 3 became. Bethesda has a very long track record of hugely influential and popular games. So I think that maybe this is the most anticipated game we've had in a very long time. And I was very hyped up myself for both of those. Cyberpunk, I could not wait. I was counting down the minutes. Starfield, when I did my Starfield stream the other night on launch night, I could feel it inside of me. I was like, oh man, like there's kind of like a buzz. Like I'm excited to play this game. So it's been hyped to death, I would say, especially as somebody who has been kind of following the game to a little bit closer degree than I normally follow games. I was, browsing like the Starfield Reddit and seeing stuff on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, and just kind of immersing myself in as much, but also as little information on the game as possible. I really wanted to go into the game not really knowing what was going on. I actually didn't know any of the plot stuff whatsoever until Todd Howard's kind of mini presentation at Gamescom a couple weeks ago, where he said, oh, you start off the game as a miner who encounters an artifact. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. And so I was trying to go in it as blind as possible. And I'm glad I did. I don't think, not that I went digging for it, but I don't think a lot of the story details like leaked out or made their way outside of, the fact that there is this storyline where you're trying to find these objects out in space. So we're going to start out talking about Starfield, and this is kind of the precursor, I guess I'll put down is, I'm not going to dive into spoilers or anything like that, but I am going to talk about the game's plot. And obviously with this game, you can go off in a lot of different directions. And, my experience, however many hours in, could be wildly different than your experience at the same amount of time in, depending on what missions we did, depending on how far we made it into the main story, like all that stuff. You can essentially, there's kind of like a first couple of missions you absolutely have to do before you get your ship. Once you get your ship, there really isn't anything stopping you from going out and exploring. There have been a lot of questions I've seen, though, of how long should I do the main story until I kind of really go out and explore. And I would say that you can certainly do it whenever you want. You might not be high enough level. There are definitely systems that I have traveled to where I'm immediately surrounded by level 30 enemy ships that were all firing on me. I mean, you can, if you're really surrounded by ships, I would say in like the starting ship that you have without any upgrades, you've probably got 5 to 8 seconds before you're completely destroyed, which is not a lot of time. You can jump out of another, into another system to kind of get away from everything. But depending on how much energy you divert from your ship's powers into your grav drive, that warp can take anywhere between, I think the shortest I've seen was like a minute and a half, and the longest I've seen was 5 or 6 seconds. So you like really have to make that split second decision if you're gonna just warp out of it. I mean, if you die, you die. Like that's, you know, I don't think you necessarily lose anything if you die. It's possible. There were a few times where I died mid-mission. I will say the checkpoints were fairly rough. Like I had to essentially go all the way back to the beginning of the mission. I wasn't thrilled about that because once I finally did complete the mission, I realized I died maybe 45 seconds before the mission was over. So that was kind of a downer. But the times I have died out in space, I want to say I just came back and I was good. I don't necessarily notice. There are like little blurbs that will pop up if anything happens. I haven't been arrested or sent to jail yet, but I did see on a stream that I was watching, somebody did, and you know, it'll say like, oh, you're out this many credits, or they confiscated this. And apparently you also lose experience points. They actually just straight up take away experience points if you get arrested. So I'm playing a fairly decent, you know, he's not up to no good for the most part. He's been a dick, but you know, I haven't like killed anybody that didn't really, you know, deserve it or anything like that. You know, I'm not out there like slaughtering innocent people. So I am going to talk about story stuff. So if you are maybe sensitive to that, you know, just be advised. I will try to use vague terms when describing missions or things like that. But to get back to that question of how far you should get into the game before you kind of go off and do your own thing. So here's the way I have figured would be a good way is eventually you get to a mission called All That Money Can Buy or something like that. Let me see if I can. It's a main story quest from Constellation, and I want to say it's called All That Money Can Buy. It's given to you by Walter. I would say that wow, I cannot type. The quest right before that one, which I don't want to give away the name. Yeah, All That Money Can Buy. Okay. So I guess the name doesn't spoil anything. The quest Into the Unknown. When you finish the quest Into the Unknown, they do a lot of exposition at the end of that quest, and you are told very upfront, essentially, this is the loop of this main story. This is exactly what you're going to be doing from now until this main storyline finishes. And I think that that's a really good section to decide like, hey, I'm going to check out of the main story for now and go off and do other stuff and maybe do a mission here or there, or, you know, I'll balance or just continue on with the main story. You could certainly do that as well. But that is the mission I think that really gives you everything you need to know about what it is the rest of this main story quest is going to do. That's where I'm at now. I have finished that quest and I've just been doing side missions and all that. I've actually done enough side missions where I'm actually kind of getting low on side missions. So the next quest I do, I think is going to be, I think I'm in the middle of doing some random activity. So there's main quests, side quests, and activities. I'm in the middle of doing a random activity. I think I'm going to finish that and then I'm probably going to move on because that next quest brings you to like a major planet, like one of the ones that they talked about in the marketing. That I haven't been to yet. So I want to do that. But I have this like checklist going of like, okay, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here. I want to go back to here, here, and here to do more. But I wanted to keep going in the main story until I kind of figured out like, okay, what exactly is it that we are doing? What exactly is the plot of this game? What's the loop going to be? And really so far, the main story I think has been pretty okay. I think that there are some main story elements that have been very good, and I think there are main story elements that aren't bad, but they're just kind of forgettable. I have had probably like a lot of people a little bit more enjoyment doing some of the side missions. There's been a few side missions I've done, which I'll touch upon briefly, that I think are really, really solid. And it definitely is reminding me a lot of the side missions that you would find in something like Mass Effect. I think the two games that you can compare Starfield the most to are Mass Effect 2 and Cyberpunk. This game has a really similar look and feel to Cyberpunk. I mean, to the point where it almost seems like they were made by the same people at times. Just a really, really there's just a handful of scenes where I was in a certain location, not like, I don't mean like a certain location, like I'm trying to hide specifics, but just like certain areas of the game that I have been to where it's like, man, this just straight up feels like something out of Cyberpunk, from like the architecture to the character clothing to just the general design elements, like all that stuff. I'm very curious to see if Cyberpunk was a direct influence on the art staff that worked on this game, because there's just a little bit too much similarity for it to have not been. So, you know, and that's not bad. It's certainly not a bad thing at all. But it's definitely there. I definitely can kind of feel it. So, to get into Cyberpunk, I have been taking running notes since I started playing. So you can follow along if you want. I streamed for a couple hours on launch night, although it only ended up being about an hour and a half of gameplay because it took a while for the game to unlock. And I also started the stream a little bit before because I wanted to talk about, you know, what was going on that day with the reviews coming out and people's talking points and gripes and complaints and grievances and all that stuff. And then I came back the next day, on Friday, a few days ago, and streamed another 2 hours of the game. So you can kind of see my first 3.5-ish hours out in the world, if you like. And then I've just been playing on my own personal time since then. So right now, I believe my last save file said I was just a little bit less than 11.5 hours into the game. So I've been playing it at a pretty decent clip since it came out, especially for me. You know, I've talked about this before, that I really only play video games so long in chunks, like an hour or less. But I've found myself, I mean, yesterday morning, Saturday, I guess this will, I'll give my thoughts when we wrap up before we move on to the next game. But this was the thing that kind of stood out to me, was yesterday morning, I had a bunch of stuff I had to do, and all of that was done, and I was going to do it in the afternoon. So the morning was completely free. So I woke up, got breakfast, all that stuff. And then I was like, all right, let's sit down and play Starfield. And I played for about 3 hours, which is the longest, like, single sitting kind of game session I've had all year. I think the last time I even got close was when I was like at the end of Jedi Survivor earlier this year. And I was like, you know what, let's just finish it. Let's just get it over with. And then I was like, okay, you know, I think I'm good. I think I'm good for the rest of the day. I don't think I need to play any more Starfield today, you know, maybe later tonight or something like that, you know, like that. And then I go about my day, get done the stuff I needed to get done. I go get groceries. I come back and I'm putting groceries away, and it was like just instinctually, I didn't even think about it. I left the kitchen, walked down the hall, got into the living room, sat down, turned on the Xbox and started playing Starfield. And like 20 minutes later, I was like, man, I thought I said I was going to be done, you know, for the day, but it was just like, I played like another 2 hours. So there's something certainly to it where it is pulling me back in. But I'll save my overall thoughts until we get to the end. So the notes I have a lot of notes. They jump all over the place because they were written at different times. So some of the notes may contradict themselves because I probably changed my opinion once I got a little bit further into the game. So here we go. Bear with me. This is going to be a little bit disjointed, but it's the easiest way for me to get all this stuff out of my head without doing like a script and a pre-recorded kind of thing. So overall, the guns feel good. Move around with your jetpack, or as they call it, a boost pack, takes a little bit of time, but it feels good as well. As an addendum to that, I would say that at this point, it's pretty. There's no real issues at all. The jetpack maneuverability, I've had no problems with it. It is a little weird that you cannot hover with them. They are just kind of like a double or triple jump. So it is a little strange. The sound design to the game is top notch. I think the lighting and clothing texture looks very good. One of the scenes that really stood out was Sarah Morgan, who is one of your companions. You're talking to her in that very Bethesda style where it's just like a close up of her, like, you know, top third of her body, you know, center frame. That's how they kind of always do it. But she's kind of like got her arms crossed and she's leaning in a little bit closer to where the camera placement is in the game. And just the texture work on her jacket was something just like, wow, like this looks like leather. I mean, this looks really, really, really nice. That definitely was pretty good. Some plant surfaces do look very rough. A lot of texture pop in does not help. There's a lot of sameness to planets. You will get onto planets that snow. You'll get onto planets that rain. You get onto planets that are nice. The planets do have multiple biomes. If you run around long enough, you can go from a snowy part to like a desert. But for the most part, like the general area that your missions are in, where you land around your ship, are kind of one type of climate or thing. And some of them just look a little rough, little the texture work is not great. The voice acting is not wonderful. There are some people that are like very good and memorable. I think the companions are probably the best, although some of their voice acting at times is a little weird. There is a guy during a side mission who's just a random character. You only encounter him for probably about 45 seconds. But whoever they pulled into the booth to do it, he like knocked it out of the park. So there are great performances in this game. Sometimes they're very fleeting, but they do exist there. The writing is I'm just gonna be honest. The writing is not good. It just really isn't good. They run the same formula with pretty much every single character. Everybody is super upbeat and happy for the most part. Even the people that are kind of like down on their luck, they had this very like optimistic, hopeful energy about them. And everybody pretty much gives you a giant info dump on their entire life story when you meet them. But that is this way it's been in every Bethesda game that I've ever seen. Gary Whitta on the Kind of Funny Games cast about the review roundup said that essentially it felt like animatronics at Disneyland. Like it's like a robot butler that's kind of talking to you or explaining things to you. And that really is how it feels at times. They do not feel real. They don't feel human. But there are moments of humanity in their performances. I think Sam Coe has probably got a little bit of depth to him that other characters lack. I think Barrett's actor has a pretty good amount of personality to him. Sam's daughter, Cora, is pretty good. Standard child performance for the most part. That you could tell that they just kind of gave directive to the actor to be like, be a precocious child. And that's pretty much what it is. So the biggest negatives of the game, bar none. I can deal with shoddy writing. I can deal with shoddy dialogue if the game's overall story is good enough, which so far it has been. The menu system and the inventory system and the map system. It takes multiple menus to navigate to a planet most times. You can fast travel immediately to any place that you have been before. It completely negates the will to explore at times. You have to force yourself to want to explore because sometimes it's just easier to hammer on that button, go fast travel to where you need to go to finish this quest. It's really a shame because Mass Effect nailed menu-driven traversal like this back on the Xbox 360. Starfield just overcomplicates things. The inventory is an absolute joke, 100%. Items you pick up off bodies give no indication what they are except for color-coded rarity indicators. There are icons within your inventory that tell you if it's a weapon, it's food, it's medical, whatever. These are not found on the little menu that pops up over a dead body. It also doesn't give you the weight of the item. And that comes into that's a big thing, is the over encumbrance. I didn't run into it for a while, and that was a lot of people's main complaint until I finally did, and it was really bad. So the more over encumbered you are, the more damage you take. You can't run, you can't fast travel. I completed a quest, and the quest items it gave me doubled my carrying capacity, and I almost died once I left that menu and got back out to the game. I had no way to know that was going to happen because it didn't tell me the weight. It didn't give me any type of warning or anything like that. My character just completely almost died. It drained all of my life almost instantly. I was able to, thankfully I was carrying enough stuff. Some of it I didn't want to get rid of, like weapons and whatnot. I was able to dump enough that I could get just under the weight limit to get back to my ship and offload things. I think that encumbrance, that mechanic has no place in video games at all. I don't think it ever had a place in video games. I think it's lazy game design, but it's hard to say that it's lazy game design because it would take more effort to implement it into a game than it would to not. It's very, very bizarre. It's one of the main complaints that everybody is having. It's going to be the first mod that a lot of people install into this game to just turn it off, get rid of it, increase it, whatever. The perk system allows you to increase your carrying capacity to a degree, but the amount of challenges and skill points you have to build up to even get to that point is hours and hours, if not dozens of hours of gameplay to be able to do. It's really, really, it's just horrible. It drags the game down in such a huge way. It is a massive negative onto this game, where if I was a professional reviewer and I was reviewing this game, let's say I was doing a 10-point scale like an IGN, I would knock off at least probably 2 points for how bad the inventory, the menu, and the the traversal stuff, the over encumbrance, all of that combined is such a huge negative. It is a massive, glaring blow to this game. It holds it back in ways that if they just not done it, I cannot believe that at no point during playtesting somebody didn't say like, hey, this sucks. Like, this is awful. I don't get how it made it all the way through. It's just really bad. Speaking of inventory, there is no button to quick swap between two weapons. So let's say you have a pistol and an assault rifle. You cannot just press a button on your controller to do that. No, you want to be able to do that. You have to use the D-pad. Now that's fine in itself to press up the D-pad, have a menu come up. Your weapons are there, or you can add other things besides weapons to this menu. Like I have med packs and all that stuff. That would be fine. Here's the issue with that. I pick up a weapon. Now I have to press pause, go into a menu, equip the weapon, add it to my favorites, back out to the game, then press the D-pad and go into. I have to do that every single time I want to equip a weapon. It is horrifically bad. I can't even say that it's antiquated game design or outdated game design because I can't think of another game that did it. And I think the reason is because nobody in their right mind would ever set up a weapons and inventory management system like this. It is so far beyond backwards. It is laughable, but it's not even laughable in a funny way. It's laughable in a way. It's like, I cannot believe that this is the game that they shipped would have things like this when so much else in the game has such a level of detail and attention given to it that so many other games don't have. Like, how do you miss these systems that you're constantly interacting with on a second by second basis? It is, I just don't get it. Maps of the planet that you are on and the city you are in, the local map is completely non-existent. There just isn't one. There's a button to bring it up and it does bring up, but it's just there. It's just a blue mess with a few icons. When you land in a city, there's no map to pull up to say, here's where the medical store is. Here's the weapons store. Here's the security office. None of that exists. There is no map whatsoever. None. You have to memorize the layout of these cities. Some cities will have signposts with arrows telling you where to go. Good luck. Because sometimes there's still cities that or stores on cities I cannot find because I don't know where they are because I just don't know how to get to them. It's so bizarre. They need to patch in an actual map. Thankfully, there are fairly large video game publications that have been complaining about this. A lot of the big outcry on their own Reddit forum, the devs are looking at it. Todd Howard himself posted on the other day, so they are aware of that subreddit. I mean, this is a huge concern that there is essentially no map. Like, to bring up that Mass Effect comparison, Mass Effect came out over a decade ago, in the era of the 360, almost 15 years ago at this point, right? Or maybe even 15 years ago, and that had it. So some of their other games have had it. Skyrim had it. Skyrim had little icons or the little shields that told you where things were in a city, and this game just doesn't have it. I just don't understand. I don't get it. All right, next up on my list, going back to that sound design, I think the guns sound great. I think the ship noises, the random things, explosion effects, all that stuff sound pretty good. My subwoofer is definitely 100% getting a workout. I will say by default, character voices are very low. If you go into your options, if you didn't change anything, your character voice settings are actually lower than everything else. Raise those all the way up and maybe dip music and effects down a little bit. Also for me, I don't know why this was, but this game disabled my Dolby Atmos settings in my Xbox that I always have on. So I had to go back in and manually turn them on. So that was very weird. So if you are using like a soundbar or surround sound system, something like that, double check your settings, make sure it didn't turn that stuff off, because it is very strange. Also, this game has no HDR, which is very bizarre for a big budget game in 2023. There is no HDR calibration whatsoever. It's very hot out today. My air conditioning is struggling to keep up. All right. Let's go to side quests. Side quests, a lot of them are much, much longer than story quests. There are story quests that are only 15 minutes long. At the time I wrote this, story quests so far have pretty much been the same quest each time and are pretty short. No real variety. Same fetch quest with different characters and locations that has not changed. I have not done any story missions yet that have not been fetch quests that I can remember off the top of my head. The game is very buggy in terms of objects clipping with the camera, people not turning around to talk to you, companions disappearing and then falling from the sky to catch up to you. I've noticed that mostly on New Atlantis near the lodge. When you fast travel to that point, sometimes they won't be there, and all of a sudden you'll just see them dropping from the sky and they'll be next to you. It is not buggy in any game-breaking bugs. I haven't had any issues with that. No crashes of the sort. Nothing like that. No inventory breaking bugs. I haven't lost any progress. Nothing's going on with my save files. All that stuff is very good. No problems with that. So whatsoever. None of the bugs I have encountered have affected the game in any way. Even with the characters turned around, not talking to, or when they're talking to you, it doesn't stop you from having those conversations. It just looks weird. You can see that on I think it's the second stream I did, where I went to go, because I chose the kid stuff perk where I had the parents. So when I went to talk to them, the father had an entire conversation with his back turned. He would kind of slowly turn his head ever so much to try and meet my eye line. You will have a lot of conversations with characters like turned off to the side because they won't rotate to speak to you when you engage them in the action of pressing the button to speak to them. But nothing like horribly out of the ordinary that broke anything or anything like that. Let's talk a little bit about side quest big moments. I will try to be as vague as I can with this, but I did the Batman side quest. If you have done it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Outer Space Batman. It was a very hard quest with a puzzle at the end that was actually really difficult to get to work, not because I couldn't figure out the puzzle. I knew what the solution was, but my companion would follow me and trigger the turret that would kill you if you get the puzzle wrong, because he was essentially interacting with the puzzle the same way I was, but he doesn't, the computer isn't going to solve it for you. So he's just running around doing whatever. He would trigger that and I died over and over and over again. So I told him to stay put so I can go off and do it. I go off and do it. He never comes back. So when I was done with that quest, I actually had to go back into the front entrance of that dungeon, for lack of a better term. I think it was like an abandoned research facility or something. Go wind all the way through over all the dead bodies, get all the way there, and then re-engage him with the text prompt to be like, hey, start following me again. And then we could fast travel out of there. So if you tell somebody to stay put, they just fucking stay put. They just sit there. Your ship only has so many spots, and setting up the outposts, which is like a big selling point of the game, is like you can have all these outposts. Outposts, also building a ship and outposts are late game mechanics. You will not have the skill points or the money to do it anytime soon. It is a late game activity for you to do. So you have crew members that are just kind of scattered out and about the world. If they are main constellation members, they will make their way back to the main constellation, like headquarters, the lodge. But I have like one guy that's just off on a planet somewhere, because that's where he stayed when I picked up a new crew member, just through the story that was going on. So eventually you're going to want to get a ship that you can fit everybody in if you want to be able to have those dialogues and the role-playing element of having this full crew that comes along with you, right? There's another mission where I had to hunt a dangerous beast. And I don't know if this is how the mission plays out for everybody, but this is what happened when I did it. I got to the planet, I found it, I could see it, and I actually looked at it and I was like, wow, that is the biggest, craziest looking enemy I have seen since starting this game. I wonder if I'm high enough level to get to it. So myself and my companion, we go off. All of a sudden, these other people show up and start shooting it, and they kill it. I walked up and I was like, oh, maybe this is going to trigger something, like when I go to harvest it to get the story quest item that I need, they'll be like, hey, we killed it, it's ours. That didn't happen. I picked it up, I turned around, another group of people came in and started fighting those people. I assume I could have gotten involved if I wanted to, but nope, I just peaced out, got back in my ship and went on my way. And I was like, I don't know if that's the way that mission is supposed to play out, but that's how it played out for me. Okay, here's a note in the middle of the side quest thing. So sometimes you have to jump systems to get across long distances. You can only jump so far because of the fuel capacity your ship has, which you can upgrade later on. But if it is somewhere you have been before, you can bypass all of that. So let's say you had to use these extra jumps to get somewhere, but then to get back, you can ignore that mechanic entirely and just fast travel there. So it really breaks immersion, and it's kind of a letdown that's a thing. They should have just probably removed the system entirely and allowed you to freely go wherever you want to go. I get why it's in there to promote exploration, but I think there's enough in this game that promotes exploration that you probably didn't need that mechanic on top of it. Some of the caves and outposts that you will run into either for side missions, story missions, sometimes you just land on a random planet and there are outposts there. They are super maze-like, and without having that map system, you can get very easily lost. I probably spent a good 45 minutes completely lost in this like underground ice cave research facility that was very difficult to figure out. I eventually did and completed it, but it was good. I had another note on the voice acting. Actually, one of the Constellation guys, I think he is supposed to be Russian, but listening to him, he sounds simultaneously Russian and Irish. So it's a little weird to have that like big inconsistency in a major like story relevant character rather than like a random side character that you would meet somewhere along the way. The last story quest I will bring up is if you are a fan of like Star Trek, there is a side quest called First Contact, which I won't spoil, but eventually you end up on, they've talked about this before, and you can dock onto ships and go onto their ship, right? You dock onto the space station and get into it. The design of the space station it feels very much like a realistic version of what like kind of like what they were doing with Star Trek, where it's like you see a lot of like flora all over the place, trees and plants in one end, and it looks kind of not so militaristic, because if you look at like the ship, especially like Star Trek The Next Generation, not only did you have like military staff on it, but you had all these other people. Like I was just exploring the ship at one point and I ran across a classroom, which is something that you saw in a few episodes of Next Generation, and it was just like, man, I don't know if this is specifically like a tribute to that kind of thing. The ship design wasn't anything like it. There weren't any nods to any characters from Star Trek or anything like that. I don't think it was an Easter egg. I think it was just sharing some of those same kind of concept and design ideas. But it was really cool. It was like a really well thought out and designed space station to run around and explore. And you only have access to it, I think, for that mission. I mean, maybe you run into them later on down the line, but that mission overall is very interesting. So if you come across First Contact as a side quest, I don't remember where I picked it up, but it's really, really neat. So yeah, my overall thoughts on the game, I am really enjoying it. I look at it like it's like the star quarterback that has a bad knee. Like he can still go and he can still put up high numbers, but there's that thing that's holding him back from reaching his true potential. And I think that's what this game feels like. Now I'm only 11 and a half or so hours in. I'm going to obviously keep playing the game. I want to see it to completion. But now knowing what that main storyline is, I may end up needing a little bit of self-encouragement to finish it up, to wrap it up. Because it's like, oh man, is this really what we're going to be doing? Not that it's like bad or anything, but like so many of the side quests just seem maybe a little bit more interesting. I still have not done any of the, like faction stuff. I haven't joined any of the factions. I'm going to start crossing that stuff off my list as I go along. I am not high enough level to really buy other ships. I do have a second ship that I got through a side quest. But it's a very good ship in overall concept, but it can only fit 2 crew members. So you lose a little bit of that role-playing element of having that kind of signs of life and humanity in the group and the team concept by the ship being kind of empty. But it is a very good high-level ship. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll have more thoughts next week as I continue to play the game this week. Yeah, going forward, it's very good. It is very good, but I think right now it's not a complete package. There are too many unforgivable issues with the game. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I think that as of right now, like if I only had the 11 hours with the game as of right now, like it makes my top 10 for game of the year, I think, because of how much I have enjoyed it, but it's not number 1. I don't know if it'd make the top 5 right now. But it'd be towards the bottom of the list. But it is a very strong effort. I think it's probably, to me, it's probably my favorite Bethesda experience so far. But please remember that I am somebody that did not like Fallout 3, did not like Fallout 4, only played Skyrim really from them. I played Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 and Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind, but Skyrim was the only one I really stuck with. I just didn't really like those other games. So I think that for me, at least, it's the one that kind of hits my interests the most from them. So that'll do it for Starfield, but there is still more to get into. I will try to be a little quick with this stuff because unfortunately for me, I am on a little bit of a time crunch with when I'm recording this show to get it up in time. Sea of Stars was the other big release of the week, and man, that game is so good. If you want to go back in time a little bit on the channel, I put up some gameplay of the demo. And I remember I mentioned in that video that the demo, there were rumors that the demo was not what it seemed like. It was not an area of the game that you were going to run into. Like, it wouldn't be that you're playing the retail release, the final, well, not retail, it's digital only, but the full version of the game. And like 5 hours in, you'd be like, oh, now I'm at the demo part. The demo is actually multiple sections of the game stitched together, which was actually kind of cool, because I remember I got through the beginning of the game and then this cutscene, whatever dialogue section happens. I was like, oh, it's the beginning of the demo. We're at the demo. And then I get off like the map to continue on like the next screen transition. And it was not what was in the demo. I was like, oh, they really did stitch things together. Oh, that's cool. All right, nice going. I think it's the best like retro styled turn-based RPG that I have played in a very, very long time. I'm only a few hours into the game. I think it's one of my favorite experiences of the year, despite not spending that much time with it, compared to other things. I think that it's such a testament to how good that game is, that it's the first game to ever come out on the same day of release to be on Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, and it still sold 100,000 copies. It's such an easy game to get essentially for free in a way, no additional financial cost to you if you subscribe to one of those two services. And it still sold that many copies. It's getting amazing press, amazing, reviews, all of it. And it deserves it because it is very, very solid. From what I hear, eventually it gets a little stale with the combat. I could certainly see that happening, but so far I am having a lot of fun with it. The plan right now is I'm going to record some footage of it now that I'm a few hours into the game and have it up on the channel. My hope is to have it up on Tuesday, so tomorrow for you guys. I should have time to record it tomorrow for me because I'm a day behind from you. And I want to put it up there and get my thoughts out maybe a little bit more as we play along with the game. But I highly, highly recommend it. If you are a fan of Chrono Trigger, especially, it's very heavily influenced by Chrono Trigger. Give it a shot because it is it's really standing out amongst all the other huge games that have come out recently. All right, last up, I put a video of this up on the channel last week, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, which is essentially a love letter to Jet Grind Radio, Jet Set Radio, whatever you want to call it. It is essentially that game. There's nothing really different about it. There are, I guess, some alternate modes of transportation. I don't remember having a skateboard or a BMX bike in those games, and maybe I'm just misremembering it. Primarily rollerblading. But you spend the majority of the beginning of the game on a skateboard, which is fine. Like, it doesn't play poorly or anything like that. My thing with the game, and I mentioned this in the video, is I just don't know if it has the legs to hold me with so much else out that either I am desperate to get back to, like Baldur's Gate 3, or desperate to continue on with like Starfield and Sea of Stars. We have a little bit of a break coming up soon in games once we get into October. September is we're pretty filled up this month. Like there's some big games coming out over the next couple of weeks, but once we get out of kind of the end of October, there really isn't that much for the last 2 months of the year for me, Call of Duty, and that's about it. So that's probably gonna be when I catch up on a lot of stuff. And I just think about Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. It's like, I don't think that fits in. Like, I don't think that makes it in. Like, I had my time with it when I recorded it. I know what that game is. Maybe at some point I come back if I want to mess around with it a little bit. But yeah, it's, it's a solid game if you know what you're getting into, if you understand what you are getting into with that style of game. It's good. It's well made. It's like I said, a love letter to those games. Next week's episode, I believe we have Davis coming back on, and I think from what I can gather from him, the brief conversations we have is he's really enjoying it. Or maybe he isn't, but he said he has a lot of thoughts. So we'll get those from him, and I'll try and compare a little bit with what I played. But that's going to pretty much wrap it up for what I've been playing. Coming up this week, I believe the only big release this week is NBA 2K. Yes, the only big release this week is NBA 2K. I don't know if I'm picking it up at launch. I might wait a couple weeks just because I'm going to be playing so much Starfield. I don't know what other indie titles are coming out this week. My list of games that I keep is pretty much just like the big hitters of the year. But over the next few weeks, until we get through the end of September, we have the Crew Motorfest, Mortal Kombat 1, Payday 3 all coming out. So some pretty big games. Then October is absolutely loaded. I mean, really, really loaded. So we'll see how the rest of the year goes with fitting stuff in and getting to the backlog and all that stuff. But that's going to wrap up the first half of the show, and we'll be back in just a minute with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and man, it is burning up in here. It is about 90 degrees outside right now. My air conditioning, like I said, is just trying to play catch up, trying to get this house as cool as possible because I don't want my dog to suffer. But I was outside all day today doing yard work, doing more chainsawing of trees down in my backyard, and actually knocked my chainsaw. The chain got knocked off. So I need to repair my chainsaw now and get back to it. But man, being outside today was just hotter than I thought. And then coming into a hot house and then being in this office with a hot computer is it's just rough. I want to go to cool, crisp, refreshing waters. I want to go to Paradiso on Starfield, the resort planet. There's a planet out there that is just like a vacation. It's like Sandals, Jamaica, but it's Sandals Space Station. But actually, the people that run that place are dicks, so I don't actually want to go up there. But all right, let's kick off the news with Michael Unsworth, kind of the last bastion of that core Rockstar writing team, has left Rockstar after 16 years. So Unsworth said he is gone. He updated his LinkedIn profile to indicate that he is gone. He was one of the 3 writers that wrote Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2. He did a lot of dialogue in Grand Theft Auto 5 and 4, Max Payne 3, LA Noire, Midnight Club, Los Angeles, and other Rockstar titles. This is the big hit because Laszlo Jones, another one of the key writers, and Dan Houser, one of the founders of the company and the lead writer, have also left the company. Another big person at the studio who was the president of Rockstar North, Leslie Benzies, also left. At this point, it's probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So Rockstar's old guard is pretty much just gone now. So whoever is working on Grand Theft Auto 6, it's pretty much a whole new writing team. It doesn't sound like it's going to be anybody left from the previous games. And I know for some people that's like a cause of celebration because a lot of the dialogue in GTA 5, it brought things maybe a little bit too silly, a little bit too parody to the point where the humor, I think at times, is a little childish with the changing climate in our world. When it comes to what's acceptable in our culture, I think it becomes a very dated game from dialogue perspective. The writing in those games, Grand Theft Auto games specifically, was always very juvenile humor, a lot of derogatory humor towards people that are gay, people that live maybe just different lifestyles, whether it was something as simple as being vegetarian or vegan, to gender and identity stuff, at times just being made fun of, being the butt of a joke for just being different than, I guess, the societal norms say is different and not different, if that makes sense. So it's going to be interesting to see like how the game changes, because they did show great writing at times. I think Grand Theft Auto 4 certainly had some pain points when it comes to outdated senses of humor and things like that. But it was overall like a much more serious tone than a lot of the stuff they had done previously. And even stuff they did after, like I said, Grand Theft Auto 5 kind of reverted back to the more silly. But the two Red Dead Redemption 1, I think, is a lot more silly than people remember. If you go back and play that game, it is definitely over the top to a huge degree, probably more than a lot of people remember. Whereas Red Dead Redemption 2, a lot of the strangers missions and these side missions were very over the top and at times even fantastical. There are hidden giants, dinosaur bones, all that crazy stuff in that game. But a lot of that writing was very serious in tone, kind of dark humor at times. And I think was probably the pinnacle of their writing, to be honest. So to have the people that were responsible for that whether you like it or not, could do that silly, goofy parody satire stuff, but also flip the switch and do very serious stories of just what it's like to be a human struggling with being a human. That's a talent that is missed no matter what. Those are skills that are hard to pull off. So I am curious to see, as somebody who loves the Grand Theft Auto franchise, it might be my favorite all-time video game franchise, if I'm really pressed to think of one. To have that be in the hands of newcomers, be in the hands of somebody new, it's both exciting, but it's also worrisome to see what exactly is going to happen. So, who knows when we see Grand Theft Auto 6 and what kind of tone we get out of it. The only thing we know is that it is a man and a woman who are essentially in some type of Bonnie and Clyde type relationship that could go one of two ways. That could go very serious and heartfelt, and the sense of relationship while you're surrounded by wrongdoings and sense of morality, or it could just swing the entire different way and it's just a farce, or maybe they try and bring it somewhere in between to a comfortable medium. But yeah, Unsworth was a very talented storyteller, and Rockstar is certainly gonna, his absence will be felt. I'm sure of that. All right, and next up, this is an interesting one. I actually kind of would like to see this. I don't know if there's a way to watch this when it comes out with English subtitles. I don't know if they would do an English dub, but there is going to be a live action drama that is based on Pokemon. This story is out of VGC the other day. It says, as detailed on the TV Tokyo website, the show's title roughly translates to "Fill Your Pockets with Adventure." It comes out every Thursday starting October 19th. The show follows Madoka Agaki, a university graduate from a small port town who decides to quit her job at a seafood manufacturer and move to Tokyo to join a small advertising agency called Adventure. She eventually receives a package from her mother containing a Game Boy Pocket and a copy of Pokemon Red. She starts playing the game and realizes it contains something that's important in life. It is a Pokemon human drama. The goal of the show is that the main character grows through their experiences playing Pokemon, and this is coming from Chris Scullion's article over at VGC. I paraphrased his words. So I think that's a really interesting concept to take. It's not about Pokemon in the sense that she is a Pokemon trainer, and they're going to use like CGI Pokemon or puppets or something to represent them. But it's just about a person's connection with video games, that hint of nostalgia that so many of us long for and crave to have a part of our lives. People like me, as you can see behind me, that are spending their paychecks to buy back their childhood by collecting toys, collecting records, collecting movies, whatever it may be. Nostalgia is a very powerful thing, and to have somebody craft a script around that, hey, that makes sense. That could be a winning combination. It's a shame that it's going to be probably very difficult to experience this show unless you are familiar with the Japanese language to a degree that you could understand it. But I hope that maybe somebody somewhere, because it is such a high profile franchise like Pokemon, we get subtitles and a way to watch this here in America, even if it's through less scrupulous means, because I'd really like to see this. I think that sounds pretty neat. So yeah, we'll see what comes of it. But I like the idea of that. I think that's a pretty pretty cool idea for a video game show. You know, it's based on a popular franchise, but it's not just the game turned into a show. I mean, we've seen that work with The Last of Us. Absolutely. You can certainly take some of the great video game stories and turn them into, you know, stuff that's a live action, you know, show or movie or what have you. But I think it's cool to see somebody taking a different approach with something like this. Next up, sad news. One of my favorite video game studios, Volition, has shut down. It kind of came out of nowhere for the people that work there. It seems like they were just notified very quickly, and that was it. You saw people posting online like, hey, you know, I lost my job at Volition today. I think they're shutting down the studio. And eventually, maybe a couple hours after that, like the word actually did come out that they were shutting it down. It had been acquired by the Embracer Group. Embracer Group reeling off of, we talked about this on the last episode, reeling off that loss of that $2 billion deal. So they were going to have to restructure the company, and maybe layoffs or studio closures were going to come of that. And this obviously, because of that, the quote from the studio, Volition: "The Volition team has proudly created world-class entertainment for fans around the globe for 30 years. We've been driven by a passion for our community and always worked to deliver joy, surprise, and delight. This past June, Embracer Group announced a restructuring program to strengthen Embracer and maintain its position as a leader in the video game industry. As part of that program, they evaluated strategic and operational goals and made the difficult decision to close Volition effective immediately." So for me, Volition is Saints Row. They certainly did other games. They did the Agents of Mayhem game, which didn't go well. They did the Red Faction games, and probably, you know, a lot of people that are my age would remember the Descent games, which was like a third person. I'm trying to figure out the way to explain it. It was like Star Fox-ish, I guess, to a degree, you know, like a ship shooter, but not like an outer space ship shooter, like a Colony Wars or something like that. But I loved the Descent games. I played those quite a bit when I was a child. But it was Saints Row. I loved the first Saints Row. I thought it was good, not great. But Saints Row 2 and Saints Row 3 were absolutely fantastic. A very different twist on the Grand Theft Auto formula, especially Saints Row 3. They went all the way with the parody, and it was such a memorable story with all the side characters, people like Burt Reynolds being in the game. It was just so over the top. I think they hit a pretty big misstep with Saints Row 4. I did not like it, and I did not play Get Out of Hell. Saints Row last year, at my Game of the Year awards last year, I gave it most disappointing game because there was so much potential and promise with the new Saints Row, and they missed the mark on pretty much every conceivable way. I thought the mission structure was poor. The gameplay was poor. The mechanics of playing the game, aiming, shooting, running, jumping, all of that were just really not fun to use. I think the lack of like licensed music, repetitive nature of things, poor writing and voice acting. I mean, it was just a very, very bad game. So it sucks that that's kind of the way they go out, and that's the last memory of that studio, because that studio was capable of very good things, and they made some amazing titles like those Red Faction games. There are people today, still to this day, that lament that they will, and now especially will lament that they never get another one of those. Some really cool technology powered those games. And like I said, you know, the Saints Row 2 and Saints Row 3 games are just super fun, just fun games, fun to be in that world, fun to play around with those mechanics and just cause absolute mayhem. The over the top stuff that you can get into, like having the VTOL jet and just bomb raiding streets and just having Burt Reynolds ride around with you. I mean, it was so fun. And I think that was one of the hardest parts to deal with the last Saints Row game that came out last year. It was just like playing like an empty shell. You know, it's like they stripped out all the personality and fun, and that was what we were left with. And that just sucks. You know, it just really does. So it's a shame that that's the taste left in the mouth, if you will, from Volition. I hope the people that work there, because I think there is talent to be found there, I hope they find their place somewhere else in the video game industry and contribute to great games in the future. All right, next up. So this comes from a website I am not familiar with, but apparently they are legit, called Insider Gaming. I had never heard of them. I have heard of Inside Gaming, which I believe is a YouTube channel that's like an offshoot of Funhouse or something, or involved with people that used to be at Funhouse. I'm not sure, but I think that's a thing. But Insider Gaming, I've seen them pop up here and there, but I'm just not familiar with them, their website kind of looks like one of those like AI generated article farm websites that just create like top 5 guns in Starfield on day 1, like those kind of things. But apparently they have legit work being done. This comes from Mike Straw, who got a bunch of inside information leaked to him about UFC 5 from EA Sports. We talked about it a few weeks ago, or maybe even more than a month ago. They put out the image, I think it was still Twitter at the time, that, hey, in September, there's going to be a reveal of EA UFC 5, and we'll see in September. And then they put out like another teaser trailer during Gamescom, I think it was. And that was it. I don't know if they announced when in September that thing is, but apparently they had some type of event recently where the game was shown off and some of this information came out. So the biggest thing about it is that they are moving UFC to the Frostbite engine, which is what pretty much everything else is on, like Madden and all that. It was on the Ignite engine before. It is only going to be on current gen systems. They are going to move to 60 frames a second. Apparently the lighting is getting a huge overhaul, character design, texture work, all of that getting a huge overhaul. They are changing the way that cuts, bruising, swelling, injuries, all of that look, to the point where they are going to have such realistic injuries that the game is actually going to be rated M, which it has not been since EA took over from THQ with the UFC license. It says that the damage is going to affect your fighter in ways that it didn't before. Broken noses, swelled eyes will cause issues for your fighter because technically your fighter can't see. Increased chances of doctor stoppages and things like that. The submission mini games, which have been super divisive, I think they are personally absolutely terrible, are being removed, and there's going to be a brand new system put in place. New arenas, obviously new fighters because they keep current. Apparently there are going to be some DLC fighters at launch, like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. I believe there was one other one, but I can't find it in this article. The way this website works is instead of having all of the information in one article about UFC 5, I guess to get more clicks or SEO purposes, there are 4 different articles, so it's kind of hard to parse through all of this stuff. But as somebody who likes UFC, I like MMA as a sport. I don't follow it as much as I used to. When I was just out of high school, around college time, I was pretty dedicated to following the sport. I'd watch The Ultimate Fighter, which was the reality show. I would watch the pay-per-views if there were fights that I wanted to see, because their pay-per-views are very expensive. They were like $80 at the time. I think they still are. So, I don't follow it as much. I see the big fights essentially. I kind of keep up with it from a distance, but I always like the EA, or not the EA games, the UFC games, specifically the THQ ones. And I think that that's the issue, is that the UFC games at this point are at the Madden level of comparison, where no matter what Madden does, it is still compared to a game from 2004, which is NFL 2K5. Which gameplay, probably play, I haven't played it in a few years, but, as good gameplay as you get in a game in 2023, presentation miles above what you get in 2023. That game had a level of detail in it that really no other game has ever had. It's unbelievable, the stuff that they did with the presentation in that game. The fact that the game was only $20 certainly helped with sales and people's overall enjoyment of it. But the UFC games are always going to be compared to UFC Undisputed 3, which came out 11 years ago, which was THQ's last year with the license. It's the ultimate, no pun intended, but the ultimate MMA game. It had UFC and Pride. Pride is a defunct MMA organization that UFC actually purchased and absorbed. It existed in Japan, though they did run some shows in America. And it was a very different rule set. You could kick somebody in the head on the ground, knee somebody in the head on the ground. It was a lot more brutal at times, but it was incredibly popular. Some of the biggest fighters in UFC history got their start in Pride, or maybe were in UFC, went to Pride and made a name for themselves and came back. People like Wanderlei Silva, Shogun Rua, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Crow Cop, the list goes on and on and on. That game was just so good. And it was the peak. It was the apex of what you would want out of an MMA game. And everything since then has been severely, severely lacking. UFC 4, which came out a few years ago, was a very hollow experience. I enjoyed playing it, but I didn't like anything about it outside of just what it was like to actually play, to fight, to do the fights. The career mode was super lacking. They tried shoehorning in the Ultimate Team stuff like they do with Madden and FIFA and all that. It was very focused on online stuff, daily challenges, weekly challenges, all that kind of stuff, which is stuff I'm not interested in. They had major things removed from the game, like the ability to keep hitting an opponent after they are knocked out, which happens in every UFC fight where a knockout happens for the most part. The referee will have to pull you off, separate you. They got rid of that. You couldn't throw elbows on the ground, despite that that is a legal thing to do in UFC fights in real life. It was just very, very odd, very, very limiting, and just kind of an overall highly disappointing experience. So yeah, I hope that it's a good game. We still don't know when the September announcement is happening. I assume probably in the next week or two. The big thing out of this leak, though, is that the game is actually coming out this year. It's coming out in October. I think he said October. I wrote it down. I think he said October 27th. But I didn't write it down. Okay, I didn't. Yeah, like I said, he has 4 different articles, this guy, so I'm not going to try and dig through all of them. But I think it was towards the end. I think it's the same day that Alan Wake 2 is coming out, which is October 27th. Maybe I pick it up. I don't know. They're gonna have to kind of win me back over after how disappointing the last game was. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it. There was another big story this week, but I didn't get a chance to get super familiar with it. SAG-AFTRA, which is currently on strike, is looking to potentially be on strike against video game companies as well for how they treat their performers. I am not super well versed in their contracts and deals with video game companies, and I didn't want to start just saying things that are just wildly incorrect. So I had it on the short list of things to talk about, but I couldn't find a good article that kind of summarizes it for me to better understand it. So maybe next week we'll dive into it, especially if maybe anything gets moving with this actually happening over the next week. So maybe that'll be on the docket for next week, but I just didn't want to talk about something I'm super uninformed about. I just didn't want to do that. But yeah, that's going to pretty much wrap things up. Thanks for hanging out. So on the channel this week, tomorrow, there will be Sea of Stars gameplay. Like I said, there's going to be a non-video game video going up on the channel on, I believe, Thursday. Yes, I believe it is Thursday. So you can check that out if you're interested. But other than that, it's probably going to be a somewhat light week this week, as I am just kind of digging into Starfield. Next week, I believe Davis, like I said, is joining the show, so that'll be a fun one. We get to talk about all the stuff he has been playing. But yeah, there's a short that went up yesterday, and I'm sure there'll probably be another short this week going up. I'm trying to do 2 a week. I've been pretty good at hitting that, but I need to start kind of taking a step back a little bit from all this stuff, because there hasn't been an episode of Full Motion Sickness in a while. I already have the next game picked out, so I want to get that done. And I've delayed the next proper Perfect Reload episode. I really need to just finish that script and start working on that. So I need to force myself to take a step back a little bit to be able to get that stuff done. But like I said, there are plenty of games coming out in September. We will have coverage of big games and small games, as I always keep my eye on all the indie releases that are coming out. But yeah, like I said, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for those that chucked out the Starfield streams. Go back and look at those to kind of have them as a companion with what we talked about at the beginning of the show. And that's going to do it for me. And I will see you all again real soon.